We made it! It's the final one! 32 out of 32, and it's the Detroit Red Wings today. As is tradition, they drafted quite often, and they drafted quite interestingly, so let's take a look at what they landed. At 15th overall, Detroit drafted my 10th ranked player, and this was a guy that I could just so easily see him going to Detroit for the last few months, and Michael Bronzig, new guard. I love this guy, and I think Red Wings fans are gonna love him. It's an interesting selection for me. He was a very valuable pick at this range. He was in my top 10. He wasn't probably gonna last much longer than this. I think he's further along in his development than a lot of the players in the top half of the first round this year, and I think it's pretty clear to me that I would be shocked if he wasn't at least a third-line guy in the NHL. He's aggressive, he's physical, he's got some offensive tools, and he's competitive, and I've seen guys just bounce right off of him when they try to check him, and he just seems like such a projectable player to the National Hockey League. The last half of his season since the World Juniors was also much more productive than his first half, which is also valuable to me. I thought this was a really, really good pick for the Red Wings and started off a pretty decent draft class. At 47th overall, they drafted a really interesting player in Max Plante. Plante was on my watch list this year because I really love the smarts that he brings to the game. Again, he's another one of these players who leads with their hockey IQ, and the rest of the picture is still kind of a bit of a work in progress. He's one of these guys who does look like he's giving 100% effort out there, especially when he has the puck. It's just that he doesn't often go far enough on his feet when he is going 100% out there, and that's okay. You can work on these things in college, and you do have a while to work with him on it. But he is a very, very smart player, especially with the puck on his stick. He's a competitor, he plays hard, and I think that there's value in that, and I think the Red Wings see that as well. Again, I don't see a huge amount of upside here, but I think with time you may end up with a guy who could be in your bottom six, maybe a good third-line complementary guy who moves the puck pretty well and gets you competitive performances. So yeah, there's a decent pick here. I might have gone in a different direction here and there, but Plante is an interesting one. At 80th overall, they picked one of my favorite re-entries in the entire draft in Ondrej Becher. Now, Becher is almost 20 years old, and that's okay. The thing with Becher, though, is I think he was a major driver of Prince George's offense this year. Everybody was focused on Tarek Parasak, but for me, Becher and Funk were driving the bus on that line significantly more often, and I value that a lot more personally. Becher was also really good at the World Juniors this year. I feel like the high-end, exciting play that he brings, he's got skill and pace, it's all just really interesting. I don't know if he's good enough to be an NHL player, but if he is one from here, I think he could look like a pretty solid one. As the third player they're drafting at 80th overall, I might have tried to wait a little bit longer to see if he was available later, but he's a good pickup in this range, and this is around where the averages had him, and he's a fine player. Probably one of the best players I didn't have ranked, and that carries value to me. I like Becher, and this is a decent pick from Detroit as well. At 126, they drafted Landon Miller of the Sioux Greyhounds, who's a goaltender, and I saw a bit of him, and similar to other goalies this year, he didn't really move the needle for me, and I guess this is a case where someone really believes in him, and you leave him for a while and see what he turns into. At 144th, the Detroit Red Wings drafted John Whipple, a Sam McGilligan favorite. Now, I've seen John Whipple for 2 years now, and this is going to be a very interesting one to keep an eye on. This is a great range to take this player. I think he's got all the talent in the world to be something really interesting. He's just not doing a whole lot on the ice. And I mean that in the best way possible. He's keeping his game really simple, and it's pretty effective and drives good tracked results in my work. It's just, for a guy that skates like him and has the skill level he has, it could be a little bit more exciting, and I feel like I would encourage him to maybe push his envelope a little bit more over the next few years. I think he's got a lot of upside. I think there's a good sense of mobility, a good sense of defensive positioning. He gets involved in defensive rushes pretty well with his lateral mobility and good sense of positioning as well. So I think there's an interesting player here, and for Detroit, you get to watch him at the University of Minnesota for the next few years, where I imagine he'll spend quite a while, and maybe you get something at the end of the day. I think there's a lot of upside to Whipple, but he uses the natural talent he has defensively right now pretty well, and we'll see what happens with him. At 176th, Detroit went to their Swedish scout and went, who's the random dude who you really like, playing in the middle of nowhere? And they went with Charlie Forslund, a 6'3" forward playing with Falu, who is now moving to a higher division in Sweden for next season. Now, I watched Forslund a little bit this year. He's big and heavy. I only watched him play hockey at the third division of pro hockey in Sweden, where he did play quite a while and was around a point a game. He's big, he uses his frame pretty well, he's resilient, and he's got a pretty quick wrist shot. It's just that all of those things happen in the third division of pro hockey in Sweden. And I believe that one other player has been drafted directly out of this level in a draft year, and I believe it was Max Freeberg by the Anaheim Ducks. So the track record drafting out of this league is not great, but at least he has some interesting physical tools that could take him places. And you know what? In the third division of under 20 hockey in Sweden this year, he had 13 goals in 7 games. So we'll see what happens with him. You know, in a way, I kind of see him as the Dean Latorno of Swedish third division hockey. He gets good results, and he's big and can fend off guys and does decently well as he is, but projecting him, I think, is a bit of a question mark. But we'll see where he goes from here. He's an interesting player. Closing things off, they drafted Austin Becher, who is a very high-skilled player who just lacks refinement around that skill. There's an interesting player here that when you watch him for moments at a time, you go, wow, that was really, really fun. How's that guy a 7th round pick? And then you watch a full game and you're going, all right, there's more to the picture here that might be holding him back. The hockey sense, I feel like, is a bit of an issue. The timing on his passes is a little shaky. His accuracy is a little shaky. Just in the offensive zone, there isn't a lot of drive to scoring areas, but he does have moments in isolated skill, one-on-one, and skating directly at players where you really think that there's an impressive player here. So time will tell. I like Austin Becher, and I'm really glad to see him drafted. I just think he's a long shot, and you leave him in college for a while, and if he develops really well there, then fantastic. So with that, we are done, and the final rating for the Detroit Red Wings in our series is a 1F. This might seem a little weird based on how I was talking about their players, but hear me out. I do really think that Michael Bronseg-Nygård is a really, really strong pick. On his own, in my own work, slotting in as a really good 2A rating, I think makes a lot of sense. Middle of the lineup, really diverse, guy you love to have in your lineup, and Detroit has quite a few of these guys now in their stable. Max Plante is an interesting project, but no guarantee. Ondrej Becher is an interesting project with skill and pace, but also no guarantee considering his age. John Whipple is a player that could go any number of a variety of directions. Landon Miller, I saw a bit of him, and similar to other goalies this year, he didn't really move the needle for me. Austin Becher. There's an interesting player here that when you watch him for moments at a time, you go, wow, that was really, really fun. Charlie Forslund. He's big, he uses his frame pretty well, he's resilient, and he's got a pretty quick wrist shot. The Red Wings have done a really decent job of amassing a lot of these just really well-rounded, competitive guys who bring a little bit of everything at a good level. So, at long last, we have reached the end of our 2024 draft recap series here with the Detroit Red Wings. If you liked it, be sure to check our Fanatics affiliate link in our description box where anything you buy in the store gives us a small kickback, or go to Scouching.ca where you can get access to an exclusive Discord server as well as data tables for drafted and undrafted prospects and plenty of other cool goodies you can check out there. That is it for our coverage of the 2024 NHL Draft. Thank you so much for coming along with me all year. I hope your team got all your favorite players, and I hope they all become first line and first pair and number 1 players in the whole wide world. All of these players have really deserved good recognition, and I think the NHL Draft is always a really fascinating experience. And so with that, thank you very much to everyone for watching, and on to the next one.